Yeah. Yes, we definitely need a happy. Oh, thank you. It's my funeral shirt. Good morning. Death has taken our beloved Carol. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation, and in their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Carol's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for her companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Adonai roi, lo exar, Bineot Hashem, Yarbitseni, Al mei menuchot yenahaleni, nafshi shovev. Yancheni v'maglet tzedek leman shemo. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Gam kilech begetz al mavet lo hirara, ki ata imadi, shiftecha mishantecha, hema yenachamuni, tarok lefanai shulchan, neged sorerai, dishanta Hashem en roshi, kosi revaya, ach tov achesen, yidifuni koyemei chayai, vishavti beveit Adonai, leorech yamim. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. A reading by Rabbi Alvin Fine. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. And life is a journey, from childhood to maturity, from youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, From foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom. From weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness, and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backwards or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. And life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. A reading written by Rabbi Karen Gluckstern Rice. Dearest Shekhinah, who resides on the highest of heights, I beseech of you, preserve Rich's marriage as a peaceful memory. Restore him to this year, to life, to ongoing healing, to the healing of the soul and the body. Bring him out from the days of his marriage into the days of his widowerhood with grace and compassion. Adonai, our God, who heals the brokenhearted and restores their body, bring consolation to the bereaved within their home and their hearts. God, blessed in day and in night, bless Rich as he rises up with his mourning. Bless him as he lies down in his private torment and yearning. Gather into eternal life the soul of his beloved, his soulmate, Carol. Do not hide your presence from me, my God, do not tarry. Strengthen my heart and give courage to my soul. Spread over me the shelter of your peace, that I might reside there through this journey of pain and grief, memories and flashbacks, dreams and nightmares, anger and pain, heartache and hatred, renewed joy and peace, rediscovered strength and livelihood. May the days of Rich's marriage remain for him memories of love, warmth, joy, and friendship. May the days of his widowerhood continue to preserve these memories and create new paths in the paths of your Torah with love, tolerance, peace, and humility. And we say, Amen. To Jake, to Rob, to Jamie. Friendship is possible when we know how to trust, when we know that others can be faithful and honest. In the earliest experiences of our childhood, in the first awakenings of our infant minds, we discover the security of love. Families may scold and complain. Parents may lecture and cry. But their deeds are usually sweeter than their words. In the hour of need, they do not judge. They help. When parents die, they leave us more than memory. They leave us the well-being of acceptance, the possibility of trust, and the reassurance of unconditional love. Without their gifts, we would stand alone in fear. We would not be able to reach out to other people in friendship. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light. Long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. Carol had many friends, many who are here today, and many that she's known for over 50 years. Farewell, my friends. It was beautiful as long as it lasted, the journey of my life. I have no regrets whatsoever said, the pain I'll leave behind. Those dear hearts who love and care, and the strings pulling at the heart and soul, the strong arms that held me up when my own strength let me down. At the turning of my life, I came across good friends, friends who stood by me even when time raced by me. Farewell, farewell, my friends. I smile and bid you goodbye. No, shed no tears, for I need them not. All I need is your smile. If you feel sad, do think of me, for that's what I'll like when you live in the hearts of those you love. Remember then, you never die. The following reading was given to me after another congregant passed away who also was suffering with dementia. God looked around his garden and found an empty place. He then looked down upon his earth and saw your loving face. He put his arms around you and lifted you to rest. His garden must be beautiful. He always takes the best. He knew that you were suffering. He knew you were in pain and knew that you would never get well on earth again. He saw your path was difficult. He closed your tired eyes. He whispered to you, "Peace be thine," and gave you wings to fly. When we saw you sleeping so calm and free of pain, we would not wish you back to earth to suffer once again. You've left us precious memories. Your love will be our guide. You live on through your children and grandchildren. You're always by our side. It broke our hearts to lose you, but you did not go alone, for part of us went with you on the day God called you home. What Will Matter by Michael Josephson. Ready or not, someday it will all come to an end. There will be no more sunrises, no minutes, hours, or days. All the things you collected, whether treasured or forgotten, will pass to someone else. Your wealth, fame, and temporal power will shrivel to irrelevance. It will not matter what you owned or what you were owed. Your grudges, resentments, frustrations, and jealousies will finally disappear. So too your hopes, ambitions, plans, and to-do lists will expire. The wins and losses that once seemed so important will fade away. It won't matter where you came from or what side of the tracks you lived on at the end. It won't matter whether you were beautiful or brilliant. Even your gender and skin color will be irrelevant. So what will matter? How will the value of your days be measured? What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is not what you learned, but what you taught. What will matter is every act of integrity, compassion, courage, or sacrifice that enriched, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. What will matter is not how many people you knew, but how many will feel a lasting loss when you're gone. What will matter is not your memories, but the memories of those who loved you. What will matter is how long you will be remembered, by whom and for what. Living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It is not a matter of circumstance, but of choice. Choose to live a life that matters. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that there is a good name that endures beyond the grave, and that there is strength in faith. With Job, we say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given. You gave us a loved one, Carol, who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in Carol's life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love, as we now say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach, blessed be the name of God, now and forever. There will be a Shiva service at Rich's home this evening at 7 p.m. at 109 Sebastian Court in Los Gatos. Following this service, we invite you to join the family in the Oneg room for a meal of consolation and to share your memories of Carol. Our Torah portion this week is Vayechi, the final portion in the book of Genesis. In this portion, Jacob bestows a blessing upon each of his sons, each blessing pertaining to the life of each son. Jacob also gave each of them a common blessing, as Isaac bestowed upon him and Abraham had bestowed upon Isaac. The Torah tells us just before Abraham's death, he gave Isaac all that he possessed, and to the children of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts. All that he possessed, the Midrash writes, does not simply refer to Abraham's material wealth, but also to his spiritual wealth, his essence, his very being. Abraham's personality and demeanor, his perspective on life, these he bestowed solely upon Isaac. One dare not equate material riches of cattle and oil with the spiritual riches secured by Abraham and passed to Isaac. Beyond anything physical or personal belonging to Carol that might be passed down, she left a beautiful legacy with her husband, Rich, her 3 children, and her grandsons. That is the blessing that passes down, and it is this blessing that we carry with us through the memories that we share. Carol's life began in Klamath Falls, Oregon. It was there and at Oregon State that Carol made some lasting friends, Marla and Rich Edge, childhood friends Joanne Skinner and Clark Pedersen, which eventually added his wife Rita, and Kathy Pickard. All of these friends were family. They studied together and traveled together. Many trips to Worldmark properties, including Windsor 15 times. These friends were with Carol when she changed the original direction of her studies. See, as far as Rich is concerned, Carol was the original Elle Woods, like in Legally Blonde. She was a home economics major. During summer vacations, she would weed onions until she decided that she wanted something different and got a summer job in the county clerk's office and became a courtroom clerk. The judge she worked for liked the fact that she was organized and intelligent, and when the summer ended, the judge asked her where she was going to law school. Carol responded that she wasn't going to law school, but the seed was planted. Carol ended up taking the LSAT, and in those days, they posted the score and the major of each person who took the test. And Carol and Marla overheard the following words from a couple of men. Did you hear they posted the results for the LSAT, and some home ec major got the highest score? What's that all about? How could that be? And it definitely was to be. In 1976, Carol graduated from Oregon State. She had already been accepted to the University of Oregon for law school and was waitlisted at Cornell, Harvard, and William & Mary. After graduation, Carol, Marla, and Joanne traveled across the US in Carol's Chevy Nova that she learned to drive only when she was 20 years old. Along the way, she stopped at Cornell and Harvard, where it was confirmed that they didn't have a space for her. Then she stopped at William & Mary and met with the dean. The dean wanted confirmation from Carol that she would attend if she was accepted. They figured since she was in Oregon and hadn't really left the state yet during her lifetime, that she wouldn't want to attend their school. She assured them that she would attend if accepted. It was time to branch away from Oregon. The dean said, Ignore the first letter that she would be receiving and wait for a second letter, though he couldn't promise at that moment if she would be accepted. Needless to say, she was accepted and immediately had to leave their car trip to return home to pack to move to Virginia. Attending William and Mary didn't just begin Carol's studies as a lawyer, but it also introduced her to her beloved spouse, Rich. However, it was not love at first sight. Carol and Rich had their first year classes together, and as the story goes, Carol and her classmate and roommate, Barbie Swatling Griswold, created a list of all the eligible classmates to date. Rich made the list, but then Barbie and Carol invited Rich for Thanksgiving dinner, and Rich said no, as he had to study, so he was crossed off the list. Clearly, this isn't the end of their story. During their third year of law school, a group of classmates decided to travel to Eleuthera, Bahamas, in the least expensive manner possible. However, they were looking at flights to Miami and then to the Bahamas. Rich said if they would let him go, they could drive to Florida and stay at his mom's house and then fly out from there. Rich was saying this to their friend Mike Bauman. Carol was standing behind Rich, facing Mike, and as Rich said this, Carol shook her head and said no. Mike said, "Great idea." It was on this trip that Rich and Carol became infatuated with each other, which eventually led to them falling in love. Graduation from law school was in 1979, and Carol didn't want to deal with all of the law firm interviews and decided to become an Army JAG. They really wanted women in this position, and so they would allow them to choose their 3 possible locations. Carol received her second choice, which was Fort Ord in Monterey. Rich took a position in San Francisco. After 1 year in Monterey, Carol transferred to the Oakland Army base. Together, they lived in Alameda, marrying in 1981. Following her stint with the Army, Carol took a civilian job with the Navy for 3 years. This job started in Oakland and then to San Bruno, a little bit of a commute. During this time, Carol and Rich had Rob and Jake, and their niece Stephanie came to live with them. When Rich was hired by Zilog, they made the move to Los Gatos. In the Torah, we know that our patriarchs blessed their children as parents often do. But when we lose a parent, we begin to think of the blessings that they brought to our lives. Carol blessed her children every day by always having their back, always being supportive. She was the best mom, soccer coach, and awesome attorney. She was a role model for Jamie. Carol went to all of Jamie's dance recitals, which could last for hours. But she came even if Jamie only danced in 4 of the multitude of numbers. Carol would drop anything to be there for Rob, Jake, and Jamie. She was adventurous, generous, and kind. One time, Carol and Rich had a date night, and they left $20 for the kids. The note on the $20 bill said that Andy will pay for the pizza. The kids couldn't figure out who Andy was. Turns out it was Andrew Jackson, the president on the $20 bill. Carol had high standards for her children, giving them just the right amount of push. She would settle for no less. She was a loving mom, and though her grandchildren came along as her Alzheimer's progressed, glimpses of who she used to be could be seen in the smile she had on her face when she snuggled with her grandsons. Carol was an amazing friend. This is attested by the longtime friends that traveled to be here today. She has been friends with Marla for 52 years, and Kathy was a freshman in the dorms, and Carol was her RA. Marla's children were like their niece and nephew, and Kathy's son was like Carol's 4th child. Carol was always there for her friends, and in return, they were always there for her. Carol was a lawyer, and a great one, but her love for home economics didn't end when she went to law school. Carol was an artist with fabrics, working with clothing and textiles. She loved to knit, beanies for babies and sweaters for her family. She was a seamstress for her family's clothes. And she was part of a group of quilters from Shir Hadash. While Carol was actually a better knitter than a quilter, she loved the social aspect of being with Linda Allen, Amy Johns, Debbie Coutant of blessed memory, Dale Bergman, Jean Bronstein, and Martha Tukalski, who are all here today. It turns out that Carol and Rich's house in Sun River is 45 minutes from Sisters, Oregon, which has the biggest outdoor quilting show. And together they would all go to shop and to be with each other, something that Carol really cherished. One of the biggest blessings was that Carol was the best thing that happened to Rich. For Rich, she was intelligent, had strong values. She was modest and was careful to judge. Carol was Rich's best friend. Together, they shared the same values for 43 years. It impressed Rich that not only was Carol there for her friends, but that she was there for anyone who needed her help. She had an abundant amount of compassion, something that she needed as a defense attorney. And yet, she was also very strong and could see through those people who were trying to game the system or who were being false with her. She could judge situations accurately. Maybe this is one of the things that helped Carol, as she loved jigsaw puzzles, lots of card games, and charades. This helped to build a competitive spirit in the Pickard household. Carol also loved to complete crossword puzzles in pen. At lunch and on the table outside, you'll find a crossword puzzle that Rob created as a tribute to Carol. This puzzle reflects their family. Please feel free to try your hand at answering the questions. Smartphones are allowed. These last 4 years have not been easy. Alzheimer's is an awful disease, robbing the person of who they were. Here is where Rich, Rob, Jake, and Jamie were a blessing to Carol. Carol knew that she was loved, even if she could no longer express it. While Alzheimer's can take the mind, the essence of who Carol was luckily remained. Parents bless their children every Friday night at Shabbat, and then we bestow blessings upon them at other times during their lives. And when we die, their memory becomes a blessing. Carol's blessing, which will guide us and fill us with love, an inheritance not necessarily of physical items, but an inheritance from the essence of who Carol was. We mourn with Rich, with Rob, with Jake, Jamie, son-in-law Charlie, daughter-in-law Katie, and grandsons Leo and Hank. Zichrona livracha, may Carol's memory be for a blessing. We're going to hear from a few people. We're going to begin with Carol's friend of 52 years, Marla.
I had to write this down because I wasn't sure I could make through it. And I also, Rich asked me to speak for a couple minutes, knowing how hard that would be for me. But as the cantor said, we met 52 years ago during a service volunteer thing we did at OSU. And that was the start of our friendship. We did many, we served on boards for student activities together and other honoraries, and we just kind of clicked and kind of, you know, when you're on track with something and somebody else is on the same track, it was just pretty wonderful. That characterized, I think, our friendship, our sisterhood for the whole time. Recently, Carol came up to me when we were at the Sun River House, and sometimes, most of the time, she didn't know me, but she knew that I was somebody in her life, and she came up and I said, "Would you like a hug?" and she just stood there. And so I hugged her, and she hugged me back. And when we pulled apart, she said, "Fun." And I said, "Yeah, we had a lot of fun, always." And I think that was truly a blessing for me to have her somehow know that. We did in college, and in addition to having some very fun times, we did some crazy things too. So one short story is that when we did crazy things was bringing back, Oregon at that time wouldn't sell Coors because it was not pasteurized, and we actually weren't 21 either. And there was a conference in Montana that the dean and of students and the director of business affairs went to, and we did, and we came back with Coors in the trunk somehow. And somehow the dean of students never found that out. Or there was the time that we had planned a watermelon feed and music, and there was this other watermelon that had been injected with a bottle of vodka. So I think those were both Carol's idea. So anyway, when we graduated, before she went off to law school, though we thought at that point it was going to be University of Oregon, and I went off to a career, and Joanne, her friend from like 4 years old, who remained a best friend all these years, we went off traveling. Before Joanne went off teaching, we went traveling. Her parents said they would pay for the gas, and I borrowed, can you believe this, $500 from my aunt and uncle, and because I had no money, but I did have a job waiting for me in August, and we took an extensive trip around the U.S., and it was a bicentennial year, and that fireworks were not as common. They didn't go off after every baseball game, and they didn't go off in your neighborhood at 4th of July. But we saw fireworks 7 times that year, including once at Disneyland, and that was pretty wonderful. But we made that loop. We spent 6 weeks traveling, and we only spent 6 nights in hotels. And there were no cell phones, of course, and we stayed with friends of friends, relatives, friends of relatives. And our parents, even though we were over 21, said in no way were we camping. So it was an amazing trip, a trip for a lifetime, and we were still friends after it. I really think that helped us bond our friendship. And because we were going off to the rest of our lives, and we were separated by a continent, and yet we still continued to be close. One little aside on that, we were broke, and we took 2-pound blocks of Tillamook cheese from Oregon off to be hostess gifts. And we had a small cooler that often didn't have ice, and it was in the trunk all the time, and nobody got sick or died from that. Okay. There's so many stories about our relationships that I've mentally reviewed, the last couple weeks, but I finally was able to focus yesterday when the cantor was talking with Rich, Rob, Jake, and Jamie about today, and they graciously allowed me to kind of sit there, and I tried not to say stuff, but that was hard. The cantor asked how Carol was a blessing to each of us, and it was like that focus. She was a blessing for me a whole time that we were friends. We were married 3 weeks apart in each other's wedding, and we both had our first child 7 weeks apart. We raised our families together, even though we lived 6 hours apart. We traveled together as families and as couples. We were closer than many siblings, which was a real blessing, I think, for both of us, and actually for our whole families. That we met so many people, we did so many things with Carol and Rich that wouldn't have been possible for us had we not met 52 years before. Over the years, we did a lot of party planning, weddings, birthdays, 4th of July together. 4th of July, we always had, there were only big watermelons then, and the only watermelon we would ever get was from Hermiston, Oregon, and we never cut into them. They took up so much space in the refrigerator, and we somehow never cut into them. I'm more cognizant of how good watermelons are now, and so are my grandsons, so we cut them a lot at our house. But our collaboration together was a benefit I think, for me mostly, because Carol was so creative, and a blessing. She was the consummate entertainer, and I really learned a lot from her. And Judy, I think she learned a lot about entertaining from you. There are so many blessings I could talk about, but really the biggest blessing was that she was my best friend, and all that entails. Carol was not afraid to try new things, except driving a stick shift. Ask me about that later if you want the full story. She was generous in so many ways, with her examples, her ethics, her ideas, her time, her service, and her caring. I feel like I lost a lot as she sank into Alzheimer's, and that's what I felt it was. It was a sinking. It was so horrible. It's a terrible disease, as you all know. It robs the person and those who surround her. But I've found, however, as I've thought about our lives, the past couple of weeks, ironically, I can now remember more vividly how she was before that horrible time. I can see her now how she was prior, and for that, I truly feel blessed. I've spent a lot of sleepless nights, I guess, because it's been hard to sleep, thinking about all the things that meant so much to me and to others. My family and I will truly miss her.
We're going to hear now from two of Carol's law partners, first Patty Green Rowe and then Chris Rudy.
I'll be a lot shorter. Hello, my name is Patty Greenrow, and Carol and I were law partners for about 30 years and have been friends for almost 40. For most of our time, we would have lunch together about once a week. In our later years, we always ate at either the Blue Mango or Freshly Baked. And we were friends so long that we had our lunch routine down. When we were at Blue Mango, we would always have chicken sauté and mango curry. And at Freshly Baked, we always shared a sandwich one sandwich, garlic turkey, and we ordered it dry. I would put mayo on my half, and Carol would put mustard on hers. Then I would give her my cheese, and she would give me her onions. We continued our tradition throughout Carol's illness, where I started bringing the sandwiches to Carol's house. And at Carol's house, I got to know her wonderful helper, Tess, and I also got to know Rich better. I had heard about Rich for years, and I learned that Rich was as wonderful as Carol had talked about for the many, many years we ate lunch together. I'm really going to miss Carol. She probably knew more about me than most people because we ate lunch together, and I would tell her about my trials and tribulations for the 30-some years. And I'm really going to miss sharing my turkey sandwich with Carol, my best friend.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Rudy, and I was Carol's law partner as well, not as long as with Patty, but a significant period of time. And I was thinking about Carol this past few days, obviously, more than I have been recently, but it was 33 years ago this week that I really first met Carol Pickard. I walked into a law firm that was then called Stenberg, McKinney, and Sinceri, and was introduced around, and I met Carol Pickard. And I looked at her, and I thought, wow, it's like Rebecca from Sunnybrook Farms has grown up. She had this fringe of blonde hair, these bright blue eyes, a sprinkle of freckles on her nose, and she did not look anything like what I thought a tough trial attorney ought to look like. And so I kind of wondered how this kind of smiling, sunny individual could possibly walk into court and to defend the interests of their clients. Well, I was wrong. She was a very tough and hardworking attorney. I think probably the best way I can describe this, one of my colleagues now, I left the law firm and became a judge. One of my colleagues on the bench, when he found out that Carol had been my partner, he said, you know, Carol represented me when I was involved in an incident and was sued. And at the time, this particular judge was a DA, a prosecutor who handled gang cases, murder cases, very tough cases. And he had a pretty high standard for how tough his lawyer ought to be. And he said, I went in and I met with her, and the first thing I saw was a bag full of knitting. And he says, I wasn't really sure if she was going to be the right person. And he said, I talked to her for about an hour, and I walked out of there absolutely confident that the right person had been hired to defend me. And years later, when he and I became friends and he found out that Carol had been my partner, he talked about her and said, you know, how impressed he had been with her and how grateful he had been to have her as a lawyer. So, you know, Carol was as apt to share a legal precedent with you as a recipe. I did not realize that she had been a home ec major until we'd been practicing together for some years. And when my wife and I got engaged, Carol threw an engagement party for us at her home with Rich. And she threw this party that looked like something out of Vanity Fair. I mean, we were in the backyard, and the table is elegant with the china, and Carol cooked and served everything, and she didn't break a sweat. It was an amazing display of hospitality, and it was just such a counterpoint to her skill as an attorney. And Carol was somewhat feared by her opponents as an attorney. Our partner Sal passed away unexpectedly, and Patty and I were thrown into the position of trying to run our law firm, and I ended up sometimes having to field calls from other lawyers. And I did get calls from other lawyers saying, Chris, can you please reassign this case to someone other than Carol? She's killing me. So what I did is I said, I'm really sorry, those are Carol's cases, and she'll litigate them, and you just have to live with it. But I did use that as a threat later with lawyers. I would say, I'm so overwhelmed, I may have to assign this case to Carol. It was amazing how you could get people to come to the table. So I want to talk about when our partner Sal died, our law firm was thrown into disarray. And Carol had retired. She had retired, and she and Rich were enjoying their lives together, and she was gone. And in October 2010, our partner Sal just died unexpectedly at 57 years old. And our law firm was like a ship in distress in a storm, because we didn't know if our major clients were going to continue to send us work, and we didn't know how we were going to handle Sal's caseload. He was extremely busy. And I don't even think we asked Carol, but she came into the office, came out of retirement, pulled out a file, and started to work, and literally picked up one whole corner of our firm and held it up for us while we were pumping ship and getting the firm stabilized. And she stayed with us until we had another associate, until it was clear that the firm was going to survive. And Carol did that, and I've never forgotten it. My wife, Arcelia, worked for Rich at Plantronics, and she shared what a wonderful boss he was. And so I just have to mention to Rich, your legacy at that firm, at Plantronics, and with the circle of friends that you had there, it lives on. And the way that you shouldered the burden of taking care of Carol and making sure that her life was as good as it could be was the equivalent of Carol saving our law firm. I used to think about those things in the same way. And so Rich and Rob and Jamie and Jake, you're very lucky to have your dad. We're sorry that you've suffered this loss. Thank you very much.
Now we're going to hear from Jamie, and then we'll hear from Rich.
My mom was so many things. She was brilliant, beautiful, loving, creative, organized, opinionated, hard to impress, generous. She was a perfectionist with flawless penmanship. A seamstress, sewing everything from her own wedding dress to our Halloween costumes. An excellent homemaker who cooked for 3 hungry, picky children and made pies from scratch. A loyal friend to her organ gang, her law school roomies, her law partners, the quilt ladies. She was a successful, hardworking attorney, my soccer coach, and some of their soccer coaches too. She was Graham to my 2 sons, who I wish had more time with her. Above all, my mom was and still is my greatest role model. It's powerful as a little girl to see your mom be so successful in such a male-dominated field. Carol Pickard never downplayed her intelligence, and she always demanded respect. She was never afraid to go toe-to-toe with anyone, and you surely didn't want to be on the receiving end of her wrath. I was always so proud of my mom's career, her brilliance, and her fierceness. I knew from her example that I could be anything I wanted to be, and that I should always be respected. My mom was so smart that she chose to spend her life with my dad, someone who was totally enamored with her. And she loved him back with all her heart. In every way, they were partners and equals. My mom loved traveling and adventuring with my dad, hiking through Scotland, visiting the lemurs in Madagascar, exploring Peru and the Galapagos Islands. As my mom's illness progressed, my dad cared for her in such an inspiring way, with complete devotion and affection, ensuring that she had the dignity she deserved. Dad, thank you for loving Mom so much and for taking such great care of her. I loved being with my mom. A few of my favorite memories include after watching a freezing cold football game in Boston, ordering overpriced room service to our hotel room, and her instructing me not to tell my dad about it. Doing jigsaw puzzles as a family by the fire in Sun River. We often joked, perhaps unfairly, maybe not, that Jake would hide a piece midway through so he could be the one to finish the puzzle. Shopping together for my bat mitzvah dress, my prom dresses, and my wedding dress. As a home ec major, my mom loved well-made, beautiful clothes, and she was my favorite shopping partner. Peer pressuring my mom to zip line in New Zealand after she vehemently told all of us she would absolutely not be doing that. But we wanted her to be on the trip, the adventure with us. And so, in a rare occurrence for Carol Pickard, she caved. And she ended up having a great time. I'm lucky to have these memories of my mom and to hear her voice everywhere I go. Whenever I see Columbia-branded clothing or Tillamook cheese, I hear her telling me, those are organ companies. I hear her whenever my 5th grade students say, me and my friend, and I respond the way my grammarian mother always did. Your friend isn't mean. I hear her whenever anyone says the word Washington. As Rob recently reminded me, she always pronounced it with an R, Worshington. And finally, when anyone is wearing orange out in the world, I hear my mom enthusiastically say, "Go Beavs!" My brothers and I don't all resemble my mom physically, but the way I see it, we each inherited a big piece of her. Rob got her love of words and skill for crossword puzzles. As the cantor mentioned, please pick up a copy and try your best at it. Jake has my mom's ability to create delicious meals and drinks from scratch and to win any argument. And I like to think I inherited my mom's big smile and her generous laugh, and perhaps her stubbornness too. One of the many terrible things about my mom's illness was that our memories of her over the last few years do not reflect who she really was. If you have a memory of a time with my mom, please share it with my family so we can continue to remember the true Carol. My biggest hope is that my boys, who never got to know the vibrant, wonderful person my mom was, come to know her through the stories we all tell them. My mom was the greatest mother I could have ever asked for, and we loved her so much. May her memory be a blessing.
Those are some tough acts to follow. I'm going to do my best. I didn't write anything down. I figured I knew enough about this subject matter to just go extemporaneously. Why did I fall in love with Carol Hill then, and now Carol Hill Pickard? You heard about the trip to Eleuthera. That's where I became infatuated with my wife, no question about that. My friend Bob Woods, who's sitting right over there, some number of years ago said, if you're with a person that you love, you think you love, and you make it through 4 months, that's the infatuation stage. And if you make it longer than 4 months, you have a chance for real love. And so in Eleuthera, I became infatuated with Carol, no question about that. We traveled across the country together, both of us ending up on the West Coast from law school in Virginia. We ended up each studying for separate bar exams. I took the California bar, Carol took the Oregon bar, and to celebrate our completing the bar exams, not passing, but completing the bar exams, we decided to go on a rafting trip on the Klamath River in Northern California for 5 days together. And the rafting trip was in Tahiti rafts, which are like little inflatable kayaks. And my father-in-law, who was 72 at the time, asked if he could come along and join us. And I didn't know Clarence all that well at the time, but I said, sure, there are going to be, 7 or 8 other people on the trip. If you want to do it, you're welcome to join us. And so Clarence came along. He was 72. He had been a hunter and a fisherman his whole life. And when we got to the river, he realized for the first time that we were going to be in these small little inflatable kayaks and paddling down the river himself, and he was uncomfortable doing that. He wasn't a strong swimmer, and he was uncomfortable. So he went to the head guide and he said, Ted, is there another way down the river? I'm uncomfortable being in an inflatable kayak. And Ted said, sure, I'm going to be rowing a big raft down the river with part of the supplies that you need to go on that we need to do the trip. And so Clarence, you can ride with me. And so he did. And Clarence was a man of very, very few words. His wife Lillian, my mother-in-law, absolutely made up for that. She was the talker of the group. And so Clarence is riding with Ted, and we're on this river, and it's a 5-day rafting trip. And as we get on the river, we immediately see river otter there. Throughout the trip, we saw all kinds of wildlife, from deer to osprey to eagles to elk on the side of the river, and all this wonderful wildlife throughout the trip. And Clarence doesn't say 10 words to Ted, the guide. And as we come around a bend in the river on the last day of the trip, there's a woman sunbathing in the nude on the side of the river. And Clarence turns to Ted and says, gee, if I'd have known there was wildlife like this, I'd have done this years ago. That was Carol's family. That's who she came from. And both Clarence and Lillian could not have been more welcoming to me as the boyfriend first of their daughter, and then their future son-in-law, and then their son-in-law. They were absolutely fantastic, and I completely adored them. When Carol and I decided to get married, the reaction from one person in our family was very different. My mother disowned me from 1981 until 1988 because I married Carol and she was not Jewish. And that put an incredible strain on Carol. And she rose to the occasion. She never badmouthed my mother once. But Carol and I had, when we decided to get married, we went to conversion classes to see if she could convert to Judaism. And we went to a temple in San Francisco, and I went with her, and the conversion classes were the worst classes I have ever attended, bar none, anywhere in the world. And so I said after 4 of those classes, this is ridiculous, we're not learning anything, they're terrible. If you will simply agree to raise our children in the Jewish faith, we can get married. And that's what we did. That wasn't good enough for my mother for a while. And so from 1981 until 1988, my mother didn't say a word to us. During that time, Rob, Jake, and Jamie were all born. We didn't hear a word from her. we had gotten married in 1981. She didn't come to the wedding. This was all very, very hurtful to Carol. When my brother-in-law, Bob Siegel, my first brother-in-law, passed away, we all gathered at my sister Judy's for Shiva and to mourn Bob's passing. Carol and I and our two boys would walk into one room and my mother would walk out. That was incredibly hurtful for Carol. And yet in 1988, after Jamie was born and after the biblical 7 years had passed, my mother decided that she wanted to reconcile. And my wife, Carol, rose to the occasion, as she always did, and welcomed my mother into our home. For that, our marriage was strengthened by what my mother did. Carol and I became closer. When Carol became ill with Alzheimer's, I owed her for those 7 years. There was no question about that. And that was a great part of the reason that I was able to care for my wife as lovingly as I could through 5 years of Alzheimer's. I remembered what she had done for me, and I wanted to pay her back in the best way that I knew how. There are two women here today. I see one of them. I don't see Mayette, but Tess is right there. Mayette is right next to her, sorry. Those two women, they're sitting right back there, helped me over the last 5 years to care for Carol, and they deserve all the credit in the world. The three of us made a very, very good team in meeting Carol's needs when she had dementia from Alzheimer's. And we kept her at home the entire time, and I'm so proud of the work that they did and that I contributed to. If anyone here knows of anyone who needs a terrific caregiver, these women now are out of a job because Carol has passed away, but I couldn't give them a higher recommendation, absolutely. There's one more story that I would like to tell, and that involves a lot of the people who are here. And that was in May of 2020 when Carol had just been diagnosed with actually having dementia from Alzheimer's. It was upgraded from cognitive memory impairment. We went to pick up a car that had been serviced at a local car dealership in San Jose, and we took Carol's car over to pick up the car that I was primarily driving. And I went in, the service had already been completed, and I went in to pay for the car and retrieve it. And while I was in the car dealership, Carol got confused and she drove off. And that was at 10 o'clock in the morning, and she was lost. And up until that time, Carol had wanted to keep her illness a secret. She was very good at hiding the fact that she was in the first stages of dementia, and she didn't let anyone know. But when she got lost, the three kids and I talked about it, and we said we have to go online and social media and disclose what's going on and get help to find her. And so we did, and Jamie and Charlie and Rob came down. Jake was up in Arcata, so he couldn't, but they came down. We got a map of San Jose and formed 16 grids, as I recall. Charlie really took the lead in that. It was the first time that I had seen him and how capable he is in action. We went to, I don't know, Kinko's or FedEx and copied the map, and through social media, a number of the people here came over to our house and searched for her, everybody taking a grid to try to find her. And Rob went through 3 different grids during the late afternoon, early evening, and then into the evening. And fortunately, in the 15th of 16 grids, he found her. And it was 11:40 at night. But we had put out a notice to the temple that she was lost. And at 11:40 at night, when we found her, it was impossible to get back on the temple's website because they don't let me or anyone just post on it. You have to get, someone with authority to post a message. So the next morning, even though we had found her, 65 people from Shir Hadash showed up at our house to try to find Carol. And that made me realize what a loving, caring community we were a part of here, to have that kind of outpouring and that kind of help from the folks in this community. So I loved my wife absolutely dearly. I think that's come across through other people's talks, the Cantor's wonderful remarks, Jamie's wonderful remarks, Chris, Patty, and Marla's, all speaking beautifully. I adored everything about her. I loved her so much. I will continue to love her for the rest of my life. I told her I loved her every morning when we got up, and I'm continuing to do that even now. With that, I'm going to close my remarks and hope that we continue to tell stories about Carol and to celebrate her life. It was a life well worth celebrating. Thank you very much.
What a beautiful blessing Carol was to all of us who had the pleasure to know her. This morning I took a quick look through your family file and found all of the B'nai Mitzvah booklets that Carol and Rich put together for the kids' bar and bat mitzvahs. And there was one song in there that was in all three, and that was Eli, Eli. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam, hachol v'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tvilat hadam, hachol v'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tvilat hadam. O God, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. In this next reading, I invite you to respond. We remember her. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember her. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember her. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of the sun, we remember her. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember her. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember her. So long as we live, Carol too shall live, for she is now a part of us as we remember her. May the love and eternal connections of our souls give us strength as we turn to recite the words hallowed by time, sanctifying the name of God. We honor the memory of Carol with the words of Kaddish Yatom, the Mortar's Kaddish. I invite you to rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei techol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'izman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lomei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, v'yit'aleh, v'yithalal, shemei kudisha, brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma, v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all of Israel, to which we say, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimeru amen. Eternal God, Master of mercy, give me the gift of remembering. May my memories of Carol be tender and true, undiminished by time. Let me recall them and love them as they were. Shelter me with the gift of tears. Let me express my sense of loss, my sorrow, my pain, as well as my love and words unspoken. Bless me with the gift of prayer. May I face you with an open heart, with trusting faith, unembarrassed and unashamed. Strengthen me with the gift of hope. May I always believe in the beauty of life, the power of goodness, the right to joy. May I surrender my being and the soul of the dead to your all-knowing compassion. Hamakom yenachem etchem betoch sha'ar avelei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God console you with all who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem. We go forth in peace to life. So I'm going to invite, since there's an aisle this way, though we'll have to move that, to have everybody turn in, and it's a custom to have the family leave first, enveloped by all of your loving arms.